Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving deep into the world of Dr. Joe Dispenza and his work on rewiring your brain for success. We have a stack of notes here and a really fascinating interview he did with Jay Shetty. So we're going to help you break it all down.
Yeah, you know what I think is so interesting about Dr. Dispenza's work is that he doesn't just talk about, the power of positive thinking.
Right.
He actually goes a step further and explains the science behind how our thoughts can shape our reality.
Okay, so it's deeper than just putting a positive spin on things.
Yeah, exactly. He delves into this concept called neuroplasticity,
Okay.
which is basically the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives. And what Dr. Dispenza is saying is that we can consciously rewire our brains by changing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So we're not just stuck with the brain we're born with. We can actually change it.
That's right, yeah. He uses this really great analogy of a computer.
Oh.
He says our brains are like computers with these pre-programmed softwares, but we actually have the ability to access the operating system and install new programs.
Okay, I like that analogy. But how do we actually do that? Where do we begin?
Well, Dr. Dispenza really emphasizes the power of repetitive thoughts.
Okay.
He says that the thoughts we repeat, whether they're positive or negative, create neural pathways in our brains.
Okay.
And he uses another great analogy. It's like walking the same path through a field every day. Eventually, you create this well-worn groove, right, that's easy to follow.
Right, yeah.
So if we keep thinking negative thoughts, we're essentially hardwiring those beliefs into our brain, making them stronger.
Oh, wow. So we're reinforcing that negativity.
Exactly. And then those beliefs shape our choices and actions, and then ultimately create our reality. In the interview, he gives this really powerful example about the thought, I'm unlovable, and how if that is repeated consistently, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. But how do we break free from those negative thought patterns that are already so ingrained?
Well, Dr. Dispenza kind of gives us a formula for change,
Right.
and it all starts with becoming aware of our unconscious thoughts.
Okay.
Because most of our thoughts, he says, are running on autopilot, and we're not even conscious of the negative beliefs that are driving our behaviors.
So the first step is to become more aware of what's going on in our mind.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then once we're aware of those negative thought patterns, we can start to challenge them and choose to think differently.
But that probably feels really uncomfortable at first, right?
Absolutely. It takes effort to break free from those habitual patterns. So Dr. Dispenza really emphasizes the importance of making different choices, even though it feels uncomfortable. And he says every time we choose a new thought or action, we're literally rewiring our brains.
So it's we're creating a new pathway instead of falling into that old, well-worn groove.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do we make those new choices stick? How do we make them become our new normal?
Well, that's where the practice comes in. Dr. Dispenza highlights the importance of mental rehearsal.
Okay.
He suggests that we can mentally rehearse desired behaviors and emotions, and so we're essentially pre-paving those neural pathways.
So we're not just thinking positive thoughts, but we're also visualizing ourselves acting and feeling in alignment with those thoughts.
Exactly.
Okay.
He says it's about embodying the change we want to see. For example, if you want to be more confident, you don't just think, I am confident. You visualize yourself, speaking up at meetings,
Right.
taking on new challenges,
Yeah.
and actually feeling that confidence in your body.
Okay. That makes so much sense. But our brains are pretty complex.
Mm-hmm.
How do we actually access those deeper levels of the mind where these changes are taking place?
Well, Dr. Dispenza is a big advocate for meditation.
Oh, okay.
He says that meditation helps us to tap into the subconscious mind, where those ingrained beliefs and programs are stored.
So meditation is more than just relaxation. It's actually a way to reprogram our minds.
That's right. He's actually done extensive research on the effects of meditation on brainwave patterns.
I've heard about different brainwave states like alpha, beta, theta.
Yeah.
Are those real things?
Exactly.
Okay.
So we spend most of our waking hours in beta brainwave states, which are associated with alertness and logical thinking. But during meditation, our brainwaves actually slow down.
Okay.
They shift into alpha and theta states. And these states are linked to relaxation, creativity, and actually increased access to the subconscious mind.
Wow. So those slower brainwave states are kind of like the key to making lasting changes.
Exactly. It's in those states that we are most receptive to reprogramming our beliefs and behaviors. It's like we're accessing the control panel of our mind, where we can actually rewrite those old programs and install new ones.
That's fascinating. So meditation is what helps us get into that receptive state.
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
And it's not just about sitting in silence. Dr. Dispenza talks about different types of meditation, including walking meditations, visualizations, where we imagine ourselves living as our ideal selves.
He also mentions the importance of breath work in the interview. How does that fit into all of this?
Breathwork is such a powerful tool for shifting our emotional state and regulating our brain waves.
Okay.
And he talks about a specific technique called the Inspire method,
Okay.
which involves consciously controlling our breath to create coherence between the brain and the heart.
I've heard about the mind-body connection, but I never really understood how breathing can actually affect our thoughts and emotions.
Right. Well, he explains that our breath is directly connected to our nervous system. So when we're stressed or anxious, our breathing becomes shallow and rapid, right? And this signals to our body that we are in danger, and that triggers the release of stress hormones.
Oh, wow. So by consciously changing our breathing, we can actually calm down our nervous system
Exactly.
and shift out of that stress response.
Yeah. Dr. Dispenza says that even just a few minutes of focused breath work can significantly reduce our anxiety. And increase our heart rate variability, which is a sign of a healthy and resilient nervous system.
So it's like we have this power within us to regulate our own state.
Exactly.
That's amazing. And it makes these practices seem a lot more accessible, even for people with really busy lives.
Absolutely. You don't need to spend hours meditating or practicing breath work to see results. Even just small, consistent efforts can make a big difference over time.
It's like building a muscle. We don't go to the gym once and expect to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
It takes consistent effort.
That's a great analogy.
But the results are worth it.
And just like physical exercise strengthens our bodies, these mental practices actually strengthen our minds and our ability to direct our thoughts and emotions.
I like that. So we talk about repetitive thoughts, the science of change, meditation, and breath work. What else does Dr. Dispenza highlight in his work?
Well, he makes this really interesting observation about our modern lifestyle and how it affects our brains and our well-being.
Okay, what's that?
He says that a lot of people are constantly in survival mode or emergency mode due to chronic stress.
What does he mean by emergency mode?
He's referring to that state of being constantly on high alert.
Okay.
Even when there's no real danger present, like our nervous system is essentially stuck in this state of fight or flight.
Oh, wow.
Right, reacting to every perceived threat, whether it's a work deadline or traffic jam,
Right.
or even just a negative thought.
So we're just constantly reacting instead of responding.
Exactly. And this chronic state of stress has really detrimental effects on our well-being.
Yeah.
It can lead to anxiety, burnout, insomnia, digestive issues, and even weaken our immune system.
So it's like our bodies are constantly pumping out those stress hormones, right?
Exactly. Cortisol, adrenaline.
Right.
These hormones are designed to help us deal with immediate threats, but when they're constantly elevated, they just wreak havoc on our systems.
So it's like having your foot on the gas pedal all the time.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to burn out the engine.
Exactly. So how do we shift out of this emergency mode?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, Dr. Dispenza suggests that practices like meditation and breath work can help us calm our nervous system and move out of that chronic stress response.
By helping us regulate our brain waves and access those slower, more relaxed states.
Exactly. So when we shift into alpha and theta brainwave states, we create a sense of inner peace and calm.
Okay.
That counteracts the effects of stress.
Right.
It's like hitting the brakes and giving our nervous system a break.
I like that. Now, what about the power of gratitude? I've heard that, being grateful can have such a positive impact on our well-being. Does Dr. Dispenza talk about that?
He does, yeah. He says that when we focus on what we're grateful for, it shifts our attention away from those perceived threats.
Okay.
And it activates different neural pathways,
Okay.
leading to feelings of joy and contentment. So it's like rewiring our brains to focus on the positive instead of the negative.
So just by changing our focus, we can actually change our emotional state and our overall well-being.
Exactly. That's what he's saying.
That's amazing.
He even goes so far as to say that our nervous system is like a powerful pharmacy capable of producing its own healing chemicals when we shift our emotional state.
It's a reminder that we have more control over our well-being than we might realize.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He points out that we have the power to choose our thoughts,
Right.
choose our feelings, choose our actions.
Yeah.
And those choices have a direct impact on our physical and mental health.
It's not just about our minds, it's about the mind-body connection,
Yeah.
right? How our thoughts and emotions can actually affect our physical bodies.
Exactly. And speaking of connection, he also touches on the power of community
Oh, interesting.
and how it can amplify these transformations.
So it's not just about individual change.
Well, he suggests that while individual transformation is essential, there's this powerful synergy that comes from collective consciousness. He believes that when groups of people come together with a shared intention, they can create a ripple effect of positive change in the world.
That's a beautiful idea. It's like we're all connected and our individual transformations can contribute to this larger shift.
He even mentions his research on random event generators.
What are those?
These are devices that produce random sequences of numbers.
Okay, so like a high-tech coin toss.
Exactly, yeah. But what's fascinating is that when groups of people focus their intention on these machines, the results become less random.
Wait, are you saying that our collective consciousness can actually influence the outcome of a random event?
It's a fascinating concept,
Okay.
and his research suggests that it might be possible.
Wow.
It seems that when we come together with a shared intention, we create this powerful field of energy that can actually influence the world around us.
That's incredible. It makes you wonder about the possibilities if we all practice these techniques, even for a few minutes each day.
Imagine the positive impact that could have, not just on our own lives, but on the world as a whole.
That's inspiring.
It really is. You know, it really begs the question, like, what if our thoughts and intentions are far more powerful than we realize?
Yeah, that's a pretty profound thought.
Yeah,
Kind of makes you want to pay more attention to what you're focusing on.
exactly. And Dr. Dispenza also emphasizes that, change isn't always easy. It's a process,
Right.
and it requires effort and commitment.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
No, he doesn't.
He's very upfront about the challenges.
Absolutely. He talks about how our bodies are often conditioned to live in the past,
Okay.
replaying those old emotional patterns over and over again.
So we're kind of stuck in a rut, just reliving the same old hurts and disappointments.
Yeah, and that keeps us trapped in this cycle of reacting
Oh.
rather than creating.
So how do we break free from that cycle?
Well, Dr. Dispenza suggests that we need to train our minds and bodies to live more fully in the present moment.
Because the present moment is the only place where we have any real control.
Right. Exactly. He calls it the creative moment,
Okay.
the space where we can consciously choose our thoughts and actions.
But that's easier said than done, right?
Mm.
Our minds are constantly wandering, getting caught up in thoughts about the past or worries about the future.
Oh, absolutely. He acknowledges that it takes practice, but he provides some practical tools to help us cultivate present moment awareness.
Like meditation and breath work.
Exactly. Those practices help us to quiet the mind and to become more aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So it's not about suppressing those thoughts or emotions.
Right.
It's about observing them with a sense of detachment.
Yeah. He says that when we can observe our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them, we create space for new possibilities to emerge.
So it's like stepping back from the drama of our minds and becoming the observer rather than the participant.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And he emphasizes that this process can feel uncomfortable at first.
Because we're stepping outside of our comfort zones and challenging those deeply ingrained patterns.
Right. He uses this analogy of being hooked up to a lie detector test.
Okay.
When something triggers us emotionally, our bodies react instantly.
And we can't hide those reactions. They're like physical manifestations of our thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. So instead of trying to suppress those reactions, Dr. Dispenza suggests that we become aware of them, observe them without judgment, and then consciously choose a different response.
So it's like hitting the pause button before we react,
Yes.
giving ourselves a moment to choose a more empowering response.
Precisely, that pause gives us the space to make a conscious choice to break free from the automatic habitual patterns that are keeping us stuck.
But how do we actually choose a different response, especially when those old patterns feel so strong and familiar?
Well, Dr. Dispenza talks about the importance of creating new emotional pathways in the brain.
So it's not just about changing our thoughts. It's about changing how we feel.
He emphasizes that our emotions are powerful drivers of our behavior.
Okay.
If we want to create lasting change, we need to shift our emotional state.
But how do we do that?
Yeah.
It's not like we can just flip a switch and change how we feel.
Well, he talks about how our bodies can become addicted to the chemicals associated with negative emotions.
So we're actually getting a chemical reward from feeling bad.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
He says that when we experience strong emotions like anger, fear, or sadness, our bodies release certain hormones and neurotransmitters
Right.
that create a physiological response.
Okay.
And over time, we can become dependent on those chemical cocktails, even if they're making us feel
It's
terrible.
like any other addiction, we crave the familiar even if it's not good for us.
Exactly.
So part of rewiring our brains for success is about breaking those addictions to negative emotions.
Exactly. And replacing them with healthier, more empowering emotional states.
But how do we do that? How do we actually change our emotional chemistry?
Well, Dr. Dispenza suggests that we can consciously stimulate the production of feel-good chemicals in our bodies.
So we have the power to hack our own biochemistry.
He says that practices like meditation, breath work, and gratitude can trigger the release of endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and other neurochemicals
Okay.
that create feelings of happiness, well-being, and connection.
That's amazing. It's like we have an inner pharmacy that we can access at any time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the more we engage in those practices, the more we strengthen those neural pathways associated with positive emotions.
So it's like training our brains to experience more joy, peace, and love.
Precisely. And he says that these changes in our internal state can actually influence our external reality.
So it's not just about feeling better, it's about creating a better life.
Exactly. He cites research on the power of intention
Okay.
and how our thoughts and beliefs can influence outcomes.
Like those studies with random event generators.
Exactly. He says that when groups of people focus their intention on a specific outcome, it can actually shift the probabilities.
So we're not just victims of circumstance. We have the power to co-create our reality.
He believes that we are far more powerful than we've been led to believe.
That's an incredibly empowering message.
It really is, and he supports this message with some pretty amazing testimonials from people who have experienced profound transformations by applying these principles.
Like those stories about people healing from chronic illnesses.
Yeah, he talks about people overcoming addictions, finding their soulmates, and achieving seemingly impossible dreams.
It's like they tapped into a hidden potential within themselves.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that these aren't just isolated incidents. He's collected a vast amount of data
Right.
demonstrating the tangible, measurable effects of these practices on the brain, body, and even gene expression.
That's really remarkable.
Yeah.
It suggests that we have far more control over our health and well-being than we might realize.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that our minds are capable of extraordinary feats.
It's like we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what's possible.
Exactly. And he also reminds us that this isn't just about individual transformation.
Right? He talks about the power of collective consciousness.
Yes.
And the possibility of creating a ripple effect of positive change in the world.
He believes that when enough people shift their consciousness, it can actually create a more peaceful, joyful, and connected world.
It's a beautiful vision, and it's something we can all contribute to.
Absolutely. Even small, consistent efforts can make a difference.
He emphasizes that it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs, challenges and setbacks.
But the key is to keep practicing, to keep learning, and to keep growing.
Absolutely. And to remember that we are all capable of extraordinary transformation.
Okay, so we talked about the science, the challenges, and like all those amazing possibilities of rewiring our brains for success. But how do we actually make this happen in our everyday lives? Like, where do we even start?
Well, one of the key practices Dr. Dispenza really emphasizes is mental rehearsal. He says it's about consciously creating the experiences we want to have in our lives, not just in our minds, but in our bodies as well.
So it's not just about visualizing the outcome. It's about feeling the emotions associated with that outcome.
Exactly. He says that our thoughts and feelings create an electromagnetic signature
Okay.
that we transmit out into the world.
Okay.
And that signature attracts experiences that match its frequency.
So if we're feeling stressed and anxious, we're more likely to attract more stressful and anxious experiences.
Yeah, that's the idea. He says we become magnets for the emotions that we're radiating.
Okay.
So if we want to create a more joyful, fulfilling life, we need to start by cultivating those feelings within ourselves.
But how do we do that when we're surrounded by so much negativity and chaos in the world?
Well, he suggests that we need to become more intentional about the information we're consuming, the people we're spending time with, and the environments we're exposing ourselves to.
So it's about creating a more supportive and nurturing environment for ourselves.
Exactly. He encourages us to be mindful of the things that drain our energy and to really focus on the things that uplift us and inspire us.
So it's about taking responsibility for our own well-being and creating a life that's aligned with our values and aspirations.
That's a great way to put it. He says we have the power to choose our thoughts, our feelings and our actions.
Right.
And those choices create the reality that we experience.
It's a really powerful message of empowerment, but it can also feel a little overwhelming. Like, where do I even start?
Well, he suggests that we start small. He
Yeah.
says even 5 minutes of meditation a day can make a difference. It's about consistency and commitment, not about trying to do everything at once.
So it's about building those new neural pathways gradually, just like we build physical muscles through consistent exercise.
That's a great analogy. And he also encourages us to be patient with ourselves.
Yeah.
Change takes time,
Yeah.
and we're likely to experience setbacks along the way.
It's not always going to be easy, but the key is to keep practicing
Absolutely.
and to remember that we are capable of incredible transformation.
Absolutely. And he emphasizes that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Okay.
It's about the growth and the learning that happens along the way.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment. It's about continually evolving and expanding our consciousness.
He says that life is an experiment, and we're all scientists in a way, testing out different hypotheses and adjusting our approach based on the results we're getting.
I love that analogy. It takes the pressure off of having to get it right all the time.
Exactly. And it encourages us to be curious,
Yeah.
to explore and to embrace the unknown.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what are some key takeaways that our listener can apply to their own life?
I think one of the most important takeaways is that we have far more power to shape our reality than we realize. Our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs aren't just these passive experiences.
Right.
They're creative forces that are constantly shaping our world.
So if we want to change our lives, we need to start by changing our minds.
Exactly. And that's not always easy, but it is absolutely possible.
Yeah.
Dr. Dispenza provides us with a roadmap with practical tools and techniques that we can use to rewire our brains for success, for happiness, for fulfillment, for connection.
It's about taking responsibility for our own well-being, cultivating a positive mindset, and practicing those habits that support our growth and transformation.
Absolutely. And it's about remembering that we're not alone on this journey. We're all connected, and our individual transformations contribute to this larger shift in consciousness that can create a more peaceful, joyful, and loving world.
That's a beautiful message to end on. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive into the world of Dr. Joe Dispenza and the power of rewiring your brain for success. Remember, you have the power to create the life you desire. It all starts with a thought.